The wind howled outside, a relentless force that seemed to shake the very foundations of the city. Rain lashed against the windows, each drop a tiny hammer striking with unyielding persistence. It was a stormy January evening in Philadelphia, the kind of night that made people want to stay indoors, seeking refuge from the chaos outside. Inside their cozy apartment, Ellen Greenberg, a dedicated and passionate young teacher, was preparing a fruit salad, a simple yet comforting task. Her fiancé Sam was at the gym downstairs, working out to relieve the stress of the day. It seemed like an ordinary night, filled with the mundane routines of life, but it wasn't. It would be Ellen's last, a night that would forever alter the lives of those who knew her. 45 minutes later, Sam returned, his mind still on the workout he had just completed. He found the apartment door locked, an unusual occurrence that immediately set off alarm bells in his mind. He knocked, the sound echoing in the hallway. No answer. He called Ellen's phone, hoping to hear her voice. Silence. He texted, his fingers trembling. Nothing. Panic started to rise, a cold dread settling in his stomach. He had a bad feeling, an instinctual fear that something was terribly wrong. Sam forced the door open, his heart pounding in his chest. The sight that greeted him was horrifying, a scene that would be etched into his memory forever. Ellen lay on the floor, her lifeless body surrounded by a pool of blood. The vibrant colors of the fruit salad she had been preparing were now a stark contrast to the crimson that stained the floor. A knife protruded from her chest, a brutal and final punctuation to her life. The storm raged on, oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded within the apartment walls, its fury a cruel backdrop to the sorrow inside. Ellen Greenberg, just 27 years old, was gone. Her dreams, her future, all snuffed out in an instant. The image of the vibrant young woman full of life and promise would forever be contrasted with the gruesome scene of her death, a juxtaposition that would haunt those who loved her. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil that would engulf the investigation into Ellen's death, a swirling vortex of questions and doubts. It was a mystery that would haunt everyone involved, a case that would raise more questions than answers. A puzzle with pieces that refused to fit, a story that seemed to defy logic and reason. Investigators would work tirelessly, sifting through evidence, trying to piece together the events of that fateful night. Friends and family would mourn, their grief compounded by the lack of closure, the unanswered questions that hung in the air. Candlelight vigils would be held, the flickering flames a symbol of hope and remembrance. As the storm outside eventually gave way to the calm of dawn, the storm within the hearts of those who loved Ellen would continue to rage, a testament to the impact of her loss. The sun would rise over Philadelphia, casting a new light on the city. But for those who knew Ellen, the shadows of that stormy night would never fully disappear. Ellen Greenberg's smile, captured in photographs, would be a bittersweet reminder of a life cut tragically short, a beacon of the joy she brought to those around her. And so the search for truth would continue, driven by the love and determination of those who refused to let her memory fade. The storm clouds would part, but the quest for answers would remain, a journey through the darkness in search of light. Sam's frantic call to 911 pierced the stormy night. The wind howled and rain lashed against the windows, creating an eerie backdrop to the unfolding drama. "My fiancé. I think she stabbed herself," he stammered, his voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. His words were barely coherent, as if he was struggling to process the scene before him. He told the operator he had just returned from the gym to find Ellen lifeless on the kitchen floor. The image of her body, motionless and surrounded by a pool of blood, was seared into his mind. The operator urged Sam to start CPR, but he hesitated. His hands trembled as he looked at the knife protruding from her chest. "She's dead. There's a knife in her heart," he insisted. The words felt heavy, laden with a finality that he couldn't accept. His words, captured on the chilling 911 recording, would become a focal point of the investigation. Every inflection, every pause, would be scrutinized for hidden meanings. Was it the panicked statement of a grieving fiancé, or a calculated attempt to establish a narrative? The investigators were torn, each theory leading them down a different path. As the call continued, Sam's composure seemed at odds with the horrific scene he described. His voice, though strained, lacked the raw emotion one might expect. He sounded oddly calm, almost detached, fueling early suspicions. Was this the shock setting in, or was there something more sinister at play? The locked door, the lack of signs of forced entry, and Sam's initial claim that Ellen stabbed herself all pointed toward suicide. But the pieces didn't quite fit together, but something didn't feel right. The scene was too neat, too orderly for such a violent act. The first responders arrived to a scene that raised more questions than answers. The air was thick with tension, every corner of the room holding a potential clue. The apartment was tidy, undisturbed. Ellen's purse was untouched. It was as if time had stopped the moment she fell. There was no suicide note, no final words to explain the tragedy that had unfolded. The brutality of the attack seemed excessive for a self-inflicted wound. The force required to drive the knife into her heart suggested something more than a moment of despair. A storm of suspicion began to gather around the case, casting a long shadow over the initial assumption of suicide. The investigators knew they had to dig deeper to uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface. They meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence, from the position of Ellen's body to the angle of the knife wound. Each detail was a potential key to unlocking the mystery. Friends and family were interviewed, their emotional reactions adding layers to the narrative. Some described Ellen as happy and full of life, while others hinted at recent troubles. Forensic experts combed through the crime scene looking for fingerprints, DNA, anything that could point to an intruder or confirm Sam's story. The team of investigators gathered in a conference room, their whiteboard filled with notes and theories. Each new piece of information seemed to complicate the case further. One detective in particular couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. He spent hours poring over crime scene photos, looking for the one detail that would make everything click. Meanwhile, the community held a vigil for Ellen, their candles flickering in the night as they mourned her loss. The sense of grief was palpable, but so was the undercurrent of unease. The investigators returned to the crime scene for a second look, hoping fresh eyes might reveal something they had missed. And then, a new clue emerged, one that would change the course of the investigation. It was a small, seemingly insignificant piece of evidence, but it held the potential to unravel the entire case. The investigators shared a knowing look, realizing they were on the brink of a breakthrough. With renewed determination, they prepared to make an arrest. The pieces were finally falling into place, and the truth was within their grasp. Sam was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of confusion and fear. The media captured the moment, the flash of cameras illuminating the night. The investigators felt a sense of closure, knowing they had done their job. But the questions would linger, the shadows of doubt never fully dispelled. The crime scene, now quiet and empty, held its secrets close. The storm had passed, but the echoes of that chilling call would haunt them all for a long time to come. The autopsy report was shocking. It was a document that painted a grim picture of Ellen's final moments, a narrative written in blood and pain. Ellen hadn't suffered just one stab wound, but 20. Each wound told a story of its own, a tale of relentless violence and unimaginable suffering. The wounds inflicted with both smooth and serrated blades covered her body, her chest, her back, her neck, even her scalp. The variety of weapons used suggested a prolonged and frenzied attack, one that was both personal and filled with rage. The sheer number and ferocity of the wounds defied the initial assessment of suicide. It was clear that this was not the work of someone in a moment of despair, but rather the result of a calculated and brutal assault. Dr. Marlon Osborne, the medical examiner, noted the wounds on Ellen's back, which would have been difficult, if not impossible, to inflict herself. The angle and depth of the wounds indicated that they were delivered by someone else, someone who had a clear intent to cause maximum harm. He also found 11 bruises in various stages of healing. These bruises were not just recent, they spanned over a period of time, suggesting that Ellen had been subjected to repeated violence. These bruises suggested a pattern of violence, hinting at a past trauma that remained unexplained. It was as if Ellen had been living in a nightmare, one that she could not escape from. The autopsy report was a gruesome testament to the violence inflicted upon Ellen. Each wound, each bruise, was a silent witness to the horror she had endured. It contradicted the narrative of a solitary suicide. The evidence was overwhelming, pointing towards a violent struggle rather than a peaceful end. The brutality of the attack, the location and nature of the wounds, and the absence of a clear motive all pointed towards a far more sinister scenario. It was a puzzle with too many missing pieces, a mystery that demanded answers. The question was no longer whether Ellen had taken her own life, but who had taken hers. The investigation had shifted from a tragic case of suicide to a chilling case of murder. The detectives were now on a hunt for a killer, Someone who had not only taken Ellen's life but had done so with a level of cruelty that was hard to comprehend. The mountain of doubts grew with each piece of evidence, each new revelation leading them deeper into a dark and twisted tale of violence and betrayal. As the investigation progressed, a series of irregularities and unsettling events fueled suspicions of a cover-up. Sam's uncle, James Schwartzman, requested access to the apartment, still considered a crime scene, to collect Sam's belongings. This request, though seemingly innocuous, raised red flags. The building manager, Melissa Aware, contacted the police, concerned about the protocol for entering a crime scene. To her surprise, she was told there were no restrictions. This revelation was deeply troubling, suggesting a lack of proper procedure and raising the possibility of evidence contamination. Adding to the suspicion, a private crime scene cleanup crew was hired to clean the apartment. This unusual step, bypassing the standard police protocol, further fueled concerns that crucial evidence might have been overlooked or even removed. The whispers of a cover-up grew louder, casting a dark cloud over the entire investigation. When James Schwartzman arrived at the apartment, he didn't just collect a suit for Sam to wear to Ellen's funeral, he also took Ellen's laptop and cell phone. This action, unauthorized and undocumented, sent shockwaves through the investigation. These devices were potential treasure troves of information. They could have contained messages, emails, or browsing history that might have shed light on Ellen's state of mind or revealed contact with potential suspects. Their removal from the crime scene without proper documentation or a warrant was a devastating blow to the investigation. The missing belongings, coupled with the earlier irregularities, painted a picture of obstruction and obfuscation. It seemed that someone was trying very hard to control the narrative surrounding Ellen's death. The question was, why? The missing laptop and cell phone became symbolic of the missing truth, the missing pieces of the puzzle that could unlock the mystery of Ellen Greenberg's death.